One of the endearing features of sport is the comeback story. Whether it's a single game, the course of a season, or a team or individual athletes return to prominence, there are few better storylines than that of overcoming adversity. When it happens, it can be like magic, but it doesn't always end in storybook fashion. This is what you don't know about the rise, fall, and comeback of Randall Cunningham. Welcome to What You Don't Know About Sports, where we delve into forgotten stories, teams, and athletes of sports history and question widely held takes on today's sports. I'm Matt, and this is Blake.
Howdy.
And today we have kind of an overlooked comeback story, the comeback of quarterback Randall Cunningham. Before we get into that, though, Blake, what's your favorite comeback story?
The first one that came to my head was Alex Smith. He played the same position in the same league as Randall did, and it was not that much different because Cunningham suffered a really bad injury, also tore up his knee, I think, and Smith almost died, because of his gruesome lower leg injury, and so and Smith ended up coming back and starting for the Redskins after I don't even remember how long he was out. It was a while with rehab and hip surgeries and all kinds of stuff, not even knowing if he was going to live through all that. And then he came back and was able to start an NFL game as quarterback and didn't play that bad, if I remember correctly. So he played better than some other people who did not almost just die that week. So that's really what matters. But that's the first one that came to my head. I've never really thought about Randall Cunningham's NFL career as a comeback story. So this is going to be interesting. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think a lot of people our age know the kind of the end of it, but didn't know where he came from or how that was a comeback. So yeah, I was pretty much into it, researching it as well. Also, shout out to that one patch of turf at FedEx Field that's broken several people's legs.
This episode is brought to you by FedEx Field.
Destroying careers
since whenever they were built.
All right, let's get into our story though. Randall Cunningham was born on March 27th, 1963 in Santa Barbara High School. No, Santa Barbara, California, but he did go to Santa Barbara High School, so it's all good. If you've been paying attention to our show through these figures episodes, there's a recurring theme where these people all have just the most traumatic childhoods in history, right? Just the most unimaginable things. This is not one of those stories. We actually get, it didn't happen again. His father was a railroad worker. His mother was a nurse. They both were around throughout his childhood, and it was a pretty athletic family. His older brother, Sam, was a star running back at USC. He actually set the modern-day Rose Bowl record with 4 touchdowns in the 1973 edition. He was a 1972 All-American, and he was a 2010 inductee into the College Football Hall of Fame. So Randall Cunningham has football in his genes. Hall of Fame brother. A little bit more about him, because we're never going to do a Sam Cunningham episode. He ran for 1,000 yards with the 1977 Patriots. By the way, he's doing all this as a fullback, and I know it's a different era of football. He's not the tailback here, what we would think of traditionally as the running back. He's playing fullback. He was a 1978 Pro Bowl selection as part of the backfield that set the single-season rushing record that stood until 2019 with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. So he's all world as a fullback, honestly. And unfortunately, he passed away in September of 2021. So just a recent passing as of this recording. But that's just incredible to me that we're not talking about one person in a family who is just this athletic. It is multiple people in this generation. And when we get to the end of the story, it's multiple people in another generation too. So it's just an athletic family.
You do see that a lot when it's I wouldn't say it's extremely rare, but you do see families who tend to all be athletic, and they don't always play the same sport like Randall and his brother Sam did. If you think of like the Jones brothers, one fights in MMA and one plays football, and for some reason I always think of this. Steven Adams, the NBA center, his sister is like an Olympic track and field person, and so like it maybe it's not the athleticism that's genetic. Maybe it's just like the will to get better. Maybe.
Definitely seems that a work ethic, right?
Somewhere
that can be
cross between the two.
Sure, I get that. So for Randall's credit, as a high school player, he led Santa Barbara to the California State Championship game. They didn't win, but they did make it to the state championship game his senior season. Now, I mentioned that his brother Sam played at USC. They're from Santa Barbara, California. But when it came time to choose a college, Randall Cunningham thought about the fact that USC was a running school, like power run offense. Quarterback throws it when he has to. And that's not really where he wanted to play. He wanted the opportunity to throw the ball. So instead of signing on with USC, he actually signed on with UNLV, which is not a football powerhouse then, wasn't a football powerhouse. Now it's never probably going to be a football powerhouse. But that's where he chose to play, the University of Nevada in Las Vegas.
That is interesting. I think of basketball when I think of UNLV. I don't know about you.
That
definitely
would be
not football.
No. It's gonna present some issues for Cunningham's career, but it does give him the option. Harkening back to an older time in football, he played both quarterback and punter at UNLV.
Okay, that's interesting.
Played special teams. He started at the school's JV team. That's how long ago we're talking about as a freshman. He's playing JV football his freshman year, then starts sophomore year at number 2 on the depth chart before rising up. His best season in college was his senior season, completed 62.5% of his passes for almost 3,000 yards, an 8.1 average. His quarterback rating that year, though, 148.4, which in college, their quarterback ratings are higher, calculated a little bit different, but that's still pretty good numbers. In 1984, he did lead UNLV to the only 10-win season in school history. That is up to this point as well. They've not won 10 games since. But they were never ranked, which is the issue with him going to UNLV. Pacific Coast Athletic Association, by this point, was not a major conference by any stretch of the imagination. It is not a conference that's competing with the Pac-12 out west. It's just a low major conference. So no respect for UNLV, even though they were 10-1 that year. The biggest surprise, because he's playing at a small school, so he's not getting a lot of notoriety, a different time in football where we aren't going crazy for mid-major and low-major schools, he was a 2-time All-American, but not as a quarterback. Both of his All-American selections were as a punter. He was only named All-American by one service, one time at quarterback, which is ridiculous, right? He's All-American punter.
I didn't even know that he was a punter. So the fact that and you see wide receivers turn into quarterbacks, that's the more That's the more lateral transition. It's like if you were a running quarterback in college, but not quite good enough to be a running quarterback, they just run you out wide. You're already familiar with how to run an offense, and then you get a pass like once a season or 3, if you're lucky.
Yep, he's out here punting the ball and punting well. So his average punt as a collegiate, so he had 145 punts throughout his career. Like, he was the full-time punter for UNLV. He averaged 45.2 yards a punt. Now, official records are only kept since 2000. They kept track of it prior to that, but college football or sportsreference.com only goes back to 2000 to rank them. If he did that today, he would be tied for 19th all time in average punt.
Yeah. When these things come up, you want to say like, oh, you played the wrong position, but we're going to find out that he didn't necessarily play the wrong position. But it is hard to believe that because quarterbacks in the NFL throw the football with their arms, punters kick it with their feet. You're normally not good at both. Like that's absurd.
Way back in the day, it wasn't super rare. I mean, it happened. It was rare, but it happened. But in the 80s, that's not the case anymore. I knew he had punted. I knew there were times he punted in the NFL. I didn't realize he was that good in college.
That's solid.
To be All-American punter twice. He would, here's another thing that's changed in football. He would go on to be drafted in the 1985 NFL draft. He was the 37th pick, so a second round draft pick. But at that late spot, number 37, he was only the second quarterback taken off the board. We think of drafts now, and we've got 6 guys in the first 20 picks gone. He's the second quarterback taken at number 37. The first quarterback taken was Bernie Cosar to Cleveland from Miami. It was the last pick of the first round. Wow. We almost went the whole first round without a quarterback.
It's like they knew how to build a team back then or something.
Or at least how to evaluate quarterbacks.
At a minimum. You were not worth my second pick overall.
Yeah. I contend that draft that had Phillip Rivers and Eli Manning and Ben Roethlisberger ruined the last 20 years of NFL drafts because everybody thought
could have
that they could, even though they knew they couldn't.
They're trying to replicate
talent every year.
Yeah, they're trying to replicate that draft, and as of this recording, all 3 are now retired, and they still can't get it right.
Yeah,
that was just an all-time great class. You can't force that to be repeated.
No.
Anyway,
he went to the Eagles. A couple of other players drafted in that draft were Bruce Smith, Kevin Green, Andre Reed, Chris Dolman, and Jerry Rice, all who made the Hall of Fame. So it's not like this was just a shallow draft by any stretch of the imagination, just not at the quarterback position. Like I said, he went to the Eagles, but the Eagles already had a quarterback by the name of Ron Jaworski. If anybody was a football fan in the early 2000s, late 90s, Jaws all over ESPN programming. I remember him from the NFL Matchup TV show, which apparently still exists. Did not know that.
Did it take a break and they came back? But I know they're doing. I know they're making new episodes.
Yeah, it's like it's you have to watch it like Sunday at 3 a.m. But it's still.
No, nobody can watch it, but they still make it.
It's still there.
It's on demand.
Yes. With the Eagles, he does a lot to pave the way for modern quarterback play. And I don't necessarily mean the Michael Vick or Lamar Jackson style player, but the Joe Burrow and Josh Allen, any quarterback that Kyler Murray does this, Patrick Mahomes, the guys that aren't looking to run, but they can just prolong a play, get out of the pocket, make things happen. that kind of player is very much, when you look at highlights and some game footage of Randall Cunningham, that's the way he played. And it's not the way everybody played back in the 1980s. He didn't get to start his rookie year, but he was used in third and long situations just to give a little wrinkle, right? We obviously are going to call a passing play, but we got this guy that can run the ball. So you got to honor that too. You can't just go straight forward on a pass rush or blitz because he might get away and be gone. He did eventually take over for Ron Jaworski at the end of his second season and became the starter in 1987. Starting in 1988, he goes on a 3-year run that can be described as kind of magical. He was named the starter for the Pro Bowl in the NFC in 1988. So just his second year starting, he's the starter in the Pro Bowl. He became the first black quarterback to do so in the history of the game. So there's a little trivia for you. He is the author of 2 of the most spectacular plays you will ever see, coming in 1989 and 1990. In 89, there was a 17-all tie against the Giants, and he was sacked at the 2-yard line. Now, him being 2-time All-American punter, remained in the game to punt. Pat Summerall, John Madden were the 2 guys on the call. Pat Summerall was absolutely surprised to see him still back there, like confused as to what was happening when Cunningham was still there behind center. And it wasn't a trick punt. It wasn't one of the little quarterbacks just going to randomly pooch it forward. It was a legitimate punt. He kicked it from 7 yards deep in the end zone, and it traveled to the Giant 40 in the air and then continued to roll to the 8-yard line, giving him a 91-yard punt.
If I'm doing my math right, that is a 67-yard carry.
In the air.
And then rolled, 25 more?
Yeah, to the 8.
That's a good bounce.
That's now to his credit, it was a wind-aided punt.
Sure.
Right? It was in Giant Stadium, so the wind is gusty. However, 91-yard punt from a quarterback.
That'd be the ultimate trick play, though. Like, do you actually know what he's going to do? Because he's fully capable of doing literally anything.
Whatever. Yeah. The punt is essentially the play that wins the game. The Eagles would force a turnover. Mike Golick is the player who forced the turnover, and then would score to win the game. Obviously, Cunningham was on the field for that too. In 1990, we get the second of his spectacular plays. The Eagles, with their traditionally absolutely awful offensive line, allowed several Bills players through. Cunningham slides to his right, dodged under Hall of Famer Bruce Smith in the end zone, avoiding a safety, rolls left, throws across his body, right? Because he's a right-handed quarterback rolling to his left, so he's having to do that weird little pivot, and he chunks the ball 50 yards in the air, running the wrong way, that was caught and went to the house.
Now, if that were to happen today, if I told you that play without telling you who the quarterback was, who would you say it was today?
Oh, that's Mahomes, easy.
Okay, thank you. He's not.
Dodge under this guy, dodge under that guy, chunk it, running the wrong direction, not rolling to his right, rolling to his left. No momentum, 50 yards in the air. And
we've
then
said this before.
The rest of the way.
We've said this before that history repeats itself, right? So we say this all the time. We tell you a story from the past that sounds really similar to something that has recently happened. We just tell you about the first one that happened because almost nothing is new. Almost none of this is new. If you were to have read that to me, I would have said Mahomes as well.
Yeah, just with the description of the play, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Cunningham led the Eagles to the NFC East Championship in 1988. In 1990, he would rush for 942 yards. Now, forget that was, here's another thing. If I describe this yardage number and what it was, you would think of a quarterback today. So 942 yards. Forget that was the third best for a quarterback ever in a season. That was the 10th most in the NFL for any player that year in 1990. That's Lamar Jackson numbers, right? Out here just running around. Now, that's not the kind of player he was, just running, but 942 yards. I mean, this is spectacular before it was expected.
Yeah, that's a starting running back.
Yeah. Eagles won 10 games each year. He was the starter from 88 to 90. He was a Pro Bowler each year from 88 to 90. He led the league in sacks 2 of those 3 years, which offensive line not helping him out.
Yeah, right.
And he was second team All-Pro in 2 of those 3 years. 3-year stretch that is as good as any quarterback is ever going to have. In fact, he won the Bert Bell Award in 1988 and 1990. I didn't know what the Bert Bell Award was before researching this story, but I do know who gives it out. It's an MVP award voted on by front office people, coaches, assistants, media members, but it's given by the Maxwell Athletic Club. Now, we all know that in college football, the Heisman Trophy is the big award everybody wants to get. But the second biggest Player of the Year award is the Maxwell Award. This is the same organization. It's just the pro football equivalent of the Maxwell Trophy. So it is kind of a prestigious award. He won it twice, Player of the Year in 88 and 90. This naturally landed him on covers of Sports Illustrated. He starts getting comparisons to a contemporary who's doing great things in Michael Jordan, right? That's the company he is in by 1991. Just crazy, right?
That's quite a stretch. That's quite a stretch. And again, that sounds like the start that somebody like a quarterback or two today, they're just handed the keys to a franchise. They're like, go do your thing, go make magic out there, and they do it, and they go and win double-digit games 3 years in a row. Like none of this is new, but that rushing number is just mind-blowing. The fact that he almost got 1,000 yards, and he probably wasn't even trying to run. He was just outrunning the defensive lineman because his lineman couldn't block anybody.
Yeah,
like running for his life, like Mahomes in a Super Bowl.
It is just to draw a comparison to a modern player. It is similar to Mahomes in the sense that he sat for a little bit, and then when it was his turn to play, everything just seemed to be handed to him. And we take for granted that Mahomes is going to end up being the greatest quarterback of all time. But I'm about to tell you the part of the story where things can change. That nothing is permanent, just like nothing is the first time.
Right.
Nothing is permanent. In 1991, Cunningham was hit in the opening game of the season, tore his ACL, and ended his year for good. Now, he did return in 1992 and led the Eagles to their first playoff win in 12 years and played well enough to earn the Comeback Player of the Year and landed second team All-Pro. So not just a Pro Bowler, but end-of-year voting, he's the second best quarterback in the league. So second time there. But then in 1993, he gets hurt again. In 1994, he's a little bit hurt and a little bit bad. And by 1995, he gets benched for poor play. The player he's benched for is Rodney Peete, whom I know from that time period of football, but everybody may not, which is significant since a guy who's an All-Pro is getting benched for Rodney Peete. The AP reported at the time that he was benched for poor performance, that he had been labeled a powder by the local media, and that there was a tiff between himself and Coach Ray Rhodes because during a playoff game, the week leading up to a playoff game, he skipped part of the week of prep to be with his wife for the birth of his child. It's not something we would bat an eye at now, but leaving the team to go be there, definitely frowned upon then. You'd probably still find people that would do it now, but it wouldn't be as questionable now, right?
Yeah.
He actually, after 1995, when he gets benched, he decides to retire. He moves back to Las Vegas. He opens a granite business and decides to be a studio analyst for TNT. This is a thing I had forgotten. The Sunday Night Football package was in its infancy in the 90s, and it was actually shown on TNT first. Then it was like a ESPN TNT split season format before ESPN finally took it and kept it until NBC got it. But yeah, TNT showed football. Forgot that completely.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. Just for a little bit, but they did it. He was one of their studio analysts. A Sports Illustrated article 3 years later, from mostly Cunningham's perspective, would confirm most of the criticisms that were levied at him. He said that he was selfish in Philly. He also confirmed that he did not like Rodney Peete or Ray Rhodes at all. Very not so veiled references to them. But he also admitted to the fact that he didn't make many reads as a quarterback. One of the criticisms about him, one of the criticisms about a lot of running quarterbacks, is they don't know how to read a defense. And he admitted to it, but also said he wasn't asked to. He was asked to run a play. This is your read. If this guy's not open, you're going to run, right? That's what they wanted him to do. So that's what he did, because that's what he was coached to do. So, he's not reading the defense, but at the same time, he's not supposed to. So I found that article interesting, that he was willing to agree to most of the things that got him booted out of Philly.
Willing to admit that, especially to be as great as he was, you would think that a lot of people wouldn't be that humble. Like, there are people in the league now who are great players who do really bad and dumb and stupid stuff, who are just not willing. Everything's everybody else's fault, right? But him being willing to come back a year or two after he retired and say, listen, this part of it was on me because I didn't get along with those people, and I didn't know how to read defenses, and again, like you said, he didn't have to. He was so athletic, he didn't really have to. But we're about to find out. We're about to find out what the future could hold for such a good-hearted person.
Absolutely. Before we do that,
oh man,
yeah, it's everybody's favorite game show. We got some trivia for Blake. I just mentioned that he won the Bert Bell Award, technically the secondary MVP, twice. Spoilers, he's going to end up winning it a third time, becoming one of only 3 players to win it 3 times.
Oh God.
Can you name either of the other 2? And if you can name both, bonus points.
Okay. So this is the secondary NFL MVP award unofficially. Yeah. Okay. So my first question, to narrow this down a little, would be what team or teams did the other 2 play for? That might help.
Well, technically, they played for the same franchise. They both were Colts.
When you say that, it makes me think one was in Baltimore and one was in Indianapolis.
That is correct. One is an Indianapolis Colt. One is a Baltimore Colt.
Okay. What position did they play?
Everybody at home is gonna start yelling at their radios now. They both played quarterback.
Okay, then this starting to seem obvious, but I don't want to. I don't want to just like throw the names out and.
Best possible questions so far. You have nailed the best possible questions.
Okay, then this can be two of my questions. I'm just going to go with it. Is it Johnny Unitas and Peyton Manning?
Johnny Unitas and Peyton Manning are the only two other players to win it 3 times.
Wow.
Which, again, that's the company that Randall Cunningham is in. Johnny Unitas, Peyton Manning, and Randall Cunningham.
That's impressive.
Yeah, for anybody. Impressive. There's a couple other players that have won it twice, but those are the only ones 3 times.
And he retired in between and came back and still could do it.
Took a whole year off.
That's impressive.
Took a whole year off.
It's really impressive.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the 3rd Bell Award. How about it? Cunningham fully intended to remain retired when he retired, but he did attend the Super Bowl in February of 1997, which would have been the Super Bowl for that 1996 season that he took off. A former assistant that he played under with the Eagles phoned him that offseason and convinced him to join also former coach Dennis Green in Minnesota. We let him off the hook. Dennis Green had just become as the greatest soundbite ever. It's never going to go away.
It's one of them.
Yeah. R.I.P. Dennis Green. He had played in Philadelphia while Green was an assistant there, and so he agreed to join Minnesota as Brad Johnson's backup on behalf of these two guys who are reaching out to him. This also reunites him with one of his early receiving targets, Hall of Famer Chris Carter, who some people forget played with the Eagles before he went to the Vikings.
Yeah, kind of a rejuvenation too. I mean, I don't think he retired in betwing, but like Eagles, meh, he's a Hall of Famer because he played on the Vikings with Randall Cunningham. Let's be real.
Cunningham's going to be the backup until December when Brad Johnson, future Washington football team legend, got hurt.
Legend.
Hey, he won the last playoff game Washington won. He's a legend. So he starts playing in December, and the Vikings make the playoffs. In the playoffs, he led the Vikings to a 10-point comeback against the Giants, which at the time was the 5th biggest playoff comeback in NFL history. We've seen a couple bigger in just the last weeks prior to this recording.
I was going to say like last weekend, prior to this recording.
But at the time, it was the 5th biggest in NFL history. In 1998, the team intends again for Cunningham to be the backup and for Johnson to be the starter. Brad Johnson's not a bad NFL quarterback, so he's the guy that's supposed to be on tap. But he gets injured again, and so in the second week, mind you, so Cunningham plays 15 games, starts 14 for the 1998 Minnesota Vikings, and this is the season that people my age, maybe a little younger, maybe a little older, it's this season that people remember him for. The Vikings had a ridiculously high-powered offense that had Chris Carter, Jake Reed, Robert Smith, and a guy that they had just drafted that was hell-bent on showing the league that they made a mistake of letting him drop to a playoff team, Randy Moss as a rookie. Now, here's a little jealousy for you. In that article I was mentioning where Cunningham confirmed most of the issues he had in Philadelphia, they also interviewed Rodney Peete. And they asked him what was different about the way he was playing in Minnesota than the way he played in Philadelphia. And Pete's answer was very short. He said, Chris Carter, Randy Moss, Jake Reed, and Robert Smith.
I mean, that can take care of a lot of problems.
just in case anybody was wondering if Rodney Peete liked Randall Cunningham at all, there's your answer. This offense was perfectly catered to Randall Cunningham, who threw, I didn't mention this talking about the highlights prior, other than the 50-yard bomb he threw. He threw one of the best deep balls in NFL history, and this absolutely caters to that. But he was also making reads. In that Sports Illustrated article, Brian Billick praised him for being able to work out coverages and pointing out that even in a game that people remember for Randy Moss going off, a Thanksgiving Day game against them boys in Dallas, he was taking what was given to him. They were giving him the bombs, and when they weren't, he was checking down like he was supposed to. Like he had evolved into a full passing quarterback, which if you're a guy that can run and you're a guy that can make reads, you're dangerous on the football field.
Dangerous.
In 98, he leads the league in quarterback rating. He throws for 3,704 yards. He throws for 34 touchdowns and wins his third Bell Award. He's named to his fourth Pro Bowl, and for the first time, he is first team All-Pro.
There he is.
Hey, finally got it. The team goes 15-1 in the regular season, and they make it all the way to the NFC Championship game where they face the Atlanta Falcons. And I wrote in the script upstart Atlanta Falcons, but I don't think we have to put the upstart part. I think if we're talking about championship games in Atlanta Falcons, it's got to be upstart because they're never really good.
Like that one lead they gave away that time. I don't know if anyone remembers in the Super Bowl.
28-3. Yeah. It's unfortunate. It's just a weird thing that the Falcons never are sustainably good. Like even when they've got good players, they just, I don't know. It's weird. I'm a Washington fan, so I'm not going to talk too much trash.
What do you
know?
In
the NFC? Yeah, right. In the NFC title game, the game is led by Minnesota all the way. It's 20-7 in the second quarter. But with moments remaining in regulation, the game was all tied. Now, this is the moment in the comeback story. You got to face adversity. The Vikings really hadn't faced adversity all year. Guy's been retired. He comes back. He's playing lights out. The team's lights out. They're 15-1. You got to face a little adversity before you can get to the promised land, right? And so here it is. The game's tied. They've driven down the field, and they're waiting on Gary Anderson to kick a field goal. Now, here's just a little background on Gary Anderson in this moment. He is third all-time in games played. He's third all-time in points. He's third all-time in field goals made. He was a member of the NFL's all-80s and all-90s teams, and he was the first kicker this season. In 1998, he became the first kicker in NFL history to convert every single extra point and every single field goal in a season. He was perfect on the year, first person to ever do that in NFL history. He steps up to kick the game winner, and he misses. He misses.
You got to feel good about sending him out there. And then,
I mean, it's like my dude from Cincinnati who's just like, well, looks like we're going to the championship game on his way out to the field.
On his way out,
like,
yeah.
You got to think it's automatic. Like, dude hasn't missed all year. And he does. He does there. Atlanta wins the game in overtime and are rewarded by being absolutely bodied by the Denver Broncos and John Elway's second quarterback win. That's a disappointing game. I was mentioning this to my brother, who is a Vikings fan for some reason, and he was actually in the Army when this game happened. and it was, I think he was in basic training, and it was like the one thing they were able to watch. So he's a Vikings fan. He's away from home. It's the first sporting event he's able to see. Gonna watch the Vikings go to the Super Bowl, and then they lose tragically. That's tough. That's tough. That's tough. And for a franchise that, is hard pressed to win, that's tough. That's a tough situation. Cunningham doesn't quite capture that magic again. The Vikings let Brad Johnson go for 1999, which, shout out to them for letting Washington have him. That was a very good thing for a little bit of time. Yeah. They brought in Jeff George and a rookie, Dante Culpepper, in 1999. Cunningham threw 7 interceptions in the first 4 games of that season before he was replaced by Jeff George. And Culpepper was named the starter going into 2000, and Cunningham left. Not on bad terms this time, just left. So just as quickly as he came back and soared to the top, it all kind of fell apart. The end of his career was kind of a journeyman quarterback. He signed to be Troy Aikman's backup in Dallas in 2000, but that's the year that Aikman suffered his last concussion and, career ended in the middle of the season. So he filled in. He actually got a chance to face off against Donovan McNabb, very similar style player, and the Eagles, and he won. So a little bit of vindication for him beating Philly. He eventually got shuffled to Baltimore, where Brian Billick was the head coach, his offensive coordinator in Minnesota. There he was Elvis Gerbach's backup. There's a name, blast from the past, right. Elvis Gerbach. He was also, fun fact, Elvis Gerbach, Joe Montana's replacement in Kansas City. After he played those 2 years in KC, it was Elvis Gerbach that was next.
I've forgotten that name, but that is pretty unique. I'm kind of sad I forgot
that. He was let go in favor of Jeff Blake, ECU legend, before the season. Yeah.
That's right.
They got a couple before that 2001 season started. And so that was the end of his career. He retired as the all-time leading rusher in yards and yards per carry for quarterbacks. He's since been surpassed by Vic and Newton in yards. He was 4th in rushing touchdowns for a quarterback when he retired. Today, he has the 53rd most passing yards. He's 44th in touchdowns, 72nd in passer rating. His approximate value on footballreference.com makes him the 72nd best player all time by that metric. That punt and pass that I told you about, the 91-yard punt remains the 4th longest punt in NFL history. The bomb of a pass that he threw is still tied for the 36th longest pass in NFL history. And if he punted enough to qualify, his 44.7 yards per punt would be tied for 31st all times in punting. Football Reference's Hall of Fame monitor has him as the 42nd best quarterback all time. That's far below being Hall of Fame worthy. He's like in the 20s below where he needs to be for that. And his athleticism doesn't stop with him. His son, Randall II, was the 2016 outdoor and 2018 indoor high jump national champion for the NCAA. His daughter, Vashti, finished 6th in the high jump in the 2020 and 21 Olympics for the United States. And because he's moved to Las Vegas, that's his home now, he's actually the team chaplain for the Las Vegas Raiders to this day. So sending up prayers for them. Timmy, what's your takeaway for old Randall Cunningham here?
Because of my age, I was not as familiar with his days as an Eagle. I knew him as just a quarterback, not a punter, but just a quarterback for that 98 Vikings team, most notably. but not knowing a whole lot before that. And it's these sorts of stories are really great. Like the highs are so high, right? Like that 3-game stretch he had in Philadelphia, like almost as good of a 3-year stretch, almost as good of a 3-year stretch as you could possibly have. And then he gets injured. Like you said, nothing's permanent. Like I say this about NBA players. We're starting because they've been there for so long. Like they've been in the NBA longer than they lived before they got to the NBA. Some of them at this point, we're like, oh my God, when is he going to retire? And man, you gotta love it while it's happening, because it could be over at any point. And I don't think Cunningham took that time for granted by any means. That's not what I'm saying, but it is unfortunate that he had such a low, and then came back to do to win another award like that too. So great all-time player. Maybe not Hall of Fame, like you said, but definitely paved the way for current quarterbacks and the way that the game is played, and people tend to forget for some reason. Like when you're talking about, unless you think about that 98 Vikings team, you don't think about him. But that's why we're here, because we're going to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my takeaway too, is to enjoy it. His story is a reminder to enjoy things as they're happening, like you said, because I mean, there's nothing written that says that Patrick Mahomes is going to continue to play quarterback the way he has for 10 more years. Like, it doesn't have to happen. Joe Burrow has already torn his ACL. There's nothing written down that says that doesn't happen again, and he's done, right? Same for any of those guys, any player in any sport, right? Enjoy it while it's there. Those Vikings teams were loaded. In 98, they are unstoppable. They don't win a title, and they don't win a title. Like, Culpepper recreates some of the magic in 2000 and 01 and some of those early 2000s years, but they never win, right? Like, you have to enjoy the ride, right? If you were spending that whole season being like, this is the year we're going to win the Super Bowl, and looking forward the whole time instead of enjoying it as it's happening, you're supremely disappointed, number one, and you missed out on one of the great seasons, offensively anyway, of all time, right? Like, you have to enjoy what's happening. I'm also reminded of him because many of his career stats mirror another quarterback who has a comeback story, except his comeback story is in movie theaters as we speak. Kurt Warner and Randall Cunningham don't have a lot to separate them other than Warner won a Super Bowl and got to another one or another two, right? So, you know, if you start looking at Cunningham, if they win in 98, it's a completely different thing. If he doesn't completely fall apart in 99, completely different story. We might be talking about a Hall of Fame case for Randall Cunningham like we are for Kurt Warner. And it's just that it's just little finite differences that make a world of difference. So.
Yeah, and playing a sport like football too. Like, he got if what injures you is not in your control, like what do you do? What do you do? You just get hit the wrong way on any particular play. You could be done. You know, you just don't have it. And that 98 team, like, you've only lost one game all year. You led that whole championship game. You send literally a perfect kicker onto the field, and he missed. Yeah, like it can end at any point for any reason. Love it while you're in it, people.
Yep. What a what if story, right? What if he doesn't get injured? What if he doesn't get injured a second time? What if he doesn't get praised so much, right? And get a little bit full of himself in the early 90s, right? All of these things. What if he doesn't miss the kick, right? There's plenty of what ifs, but a fantastic career, fantastic talent at the very least. Randall Cunningham. I hope you enjoyed that story. If you've got any ideas for a story in the future, let us know. We'll be glad to tackle it for you. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of What You Don't Know About Sports. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please leave us a review, 5 stars only please, and hit that subscribe button wherever you listen. If you have a great sports story, we want to hear about it. You can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WYDKAS Podcast, and on our YouTube channel at What You Don't Know About Sports Podcast. All episodes are written, recorded, and edited by us. Stay tuned for the next episode.